Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. Hey, look, I wanted to go over 5 pieces of legislation that the VFW, so the Veterans of Foreign Wars, are supporting, and they are doing so with an actual statement to the United States House of Representatives Committee on Veterans Affairs. And so they wrote out this letter and they sent it over. This happened fairly recently. This happened last month in November. But I wanted to share it with you so you're aware. And here's the thing. When it comes to legislation, it will go nowhere if we as the constituency are not letting our elected officials know that we support it and want them to support it as well. So it's as easy as a phone call or an email to your congressional representative. So with that, again, 5 pieces of legislation. If you want to support this channel and make sure that this word gets out, let the video run. That's the easiest way to do it because it gets into the hands of more of us in the veteran sphere, right? And that's the most important piece. Hit that thumbs up for me. That's another very important piece. And I appreciate all the subscriptions and memberships. If you're not a member, consider joining. It does support the channel and it helps me to find you in the comments. All right, so let's jump into it here. I'm going to kind of skip some pieces for the sake of time. I know some of you appreciate that, so we'll jump through it here. So like I told you, this is from the VFW to the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Veterans Affairs, and actually a subcommittee as well on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs. And it's regarding pending legislation, and this just was sent out in November. All right, so jumping into it, H.R. 1753. It's H.R. 1753. That's the Jax, Jax Act. The VFW supports this legislation to ensure that certain members of the armed forces who served in female cultural support teams receive proper credit for such service. A part of our organization's mission is to foster camaraderie among the United States veterans of overseas conflicts. This aligns with the goal that the Special Operations Forces had in 2010 when a female cultural support team was implemented to bridge a communications gap that prevented the maximization, you know what I mean, of strategic, I don't know why it sounds so, something's wrong. Anyway, of strategic objective during counterinsurgency in Iraq and Afghanistan. However, the Department of Defense in 1994 direct ground combat definition of assignment rule created a barrier that would not allow the combat characterization assignment for females. The decision to implement these teams in Iraq and Afghanistan combat operations paved the way for a major change in this rule that integrated females into combat roles. Today, covered service is not allowed or classified as combat service. In some instances, this has negative impact on a favorable awards of service-connected disability compensation and benefits. This legislation would allow the Department of Veterans Affairs to treat covered service as combat service and grant service-connected compensation for certain benefits when female veterans who participated in combat operations claim traumatic brain injuries, post-traumatic stress, and disabling physical trauma. It is unjust that the members of female cultural support teams who facilitated a major change in combat roles should be denied the full benefits they deserve from their hazardous duty experience. Absolutely agreed. And again, that's the HR 1753 Jax Act. Call your district office for your representative, your congressional representative. Let them know you support HR 1753 Jax Act. If you do. If you don't, then you don't. But I don't see why you wouldn't. All right, moving on. HR 3790, 3790, HR 3790, Justice for ALS Veterans Act of 2023. The VFW supports this legislation. VA considers ALS a presumptive service-connected disease. For those that don't know, no matter what. It's just if you have it and you served in the military, it's a presumptive. Done. And due to its progressive nature, automatically rates any diagnosed veteran at 100% once service connected. If a veteran with service connected ALS then dies, the surviving spouse is eligible to receive dependency and indemnity compensation in cases where the veteran had a VA disability rating of totally disabled with ALS for at least 8 full years leading up to the death and was married during those same 8 years. The surviving spouse is then entitled to additional monthly payment called DIC. It's a kicker. And I've went all about this stuff in the past in other videos. So if you want to know more about DIC, you can kind of find that. A surviving spouse should be entitled to the 8-year provision regardless of how long the veteran had ALS, taking into consideration the full-time care often needed a person diagnosed with ALS, and the average life expectancy following diagnosis is from 2 to 5 years. We see this as an important addition to for these survivors. I absolutely agree. So basically what they're saying is that if a veteran has ALS and subsequently passes away due to their ALS or complications thereof, the veteran spouse would receive DIC. However, they must have been married for at least 8 years up to the death and had this condition for and been rated at 100% for that same 8 years, or had the condition for at least those 8 years, I should say. And then they get that kicker, and I can't remember how much it is, about $300 or so. So in order to really align this correctly, ALS, one, it's a presumptive, and two, the life expectancy doesn't reach the 8-year mark. So what they're saying is basically because it's a presumptive and because there's a low probability of hitting the 8-year mark, they should just essentially grandfather or grandmother, either way, the spouse into the 8-year provision regardless of length of time, if it's ALS only. I'm for that. I'm all for that. So again, that's HR 3790, the Justice for ALS Veterans Act. And really, it's really for peace of mind for the veteran, but it's a benefit for the spouse is what will happen. Next is HR 4016, and then we got a couple more after this. So HR 4016, Veteran Fraud Reimbursement Act, and HR 4190, Restoring Benefits to Defrauded Veterans Act. So there's two of them. HR 4016, Veteran Fraud Reimbursement Act, and there's HR 4190, Restoring Benefits to Defrauded Veterans Act. Recently did a video on this as well on one of them. So let's jump through this real quick. The VFW supports both bills that seek to restore benefits to veterans and their families who are victims of abuse or fraud by fiduciaries. Again, this is pinpointing fiduciaries. The Veterans Benefits Administration appoints fiduciaries on behalf of veterans who are unable to manage their financial affairs due to injury, disease, age, or other reasons. It also investigates reports of fiduciary misuse of these funds. According to a July 2021 Office of the Inspector General report from January 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2019, VBA staff initiated approximately 12,000 allegations of misused benefits by fiduciaries. Sometimes fiduciaries are family members, sometimes those family members aren't as trusted as we might want them to be, and sometimes they are assigned fiduciaries who you don't know, and they're not family, and they're not trustworthy either, right? So it happens. Historically, VA could make automatic repayments only to veterans defrauded by their fiduciaries in certain cases. A provision within the Johnny Isaacson and David Rowe Veterans Health Care and Benefits Improvement Act of 2020 intended to correct this inequity and allow for automatic reimbursement in all instances of fiduciary fraud. An unintended consequence of this provision was that it created a requirement for VBA to make a negligence determination and for VA to investigate its own culpability in all cases of fiduciary misuse before reissuing payments to the beneficiaries. This has created an unnecessary and time-consuming process as VA's role in the appointment of the fiduciary or its lack of proper oversight does not change the outcome for the veteran. Agreed? The OIG report identified significant wait times for beneficiaries and delays in repayments of the 40 cases reviewed. It took an average of 228 days for VBA to complete the misuse determinations. Some cases took a year or longer. It also cited that negligence determinations were a key inefficiency in the reimbursement process. VA negligence determinations should never delay veterans from receiving their reimbursements, as this could potentially create significant financial hardship for an already vulnerable population. Agreed? Additionally, we support, and we again as the VFW, support the provision to ensure whenever the Secretary of Veterans Affairs determines repayment of those funds must be issued to the veteran, but the veteran has passed away, the funds would be paid to the veteran's estate. These benefits may be critical for the veteran's surviving spouse, next of kin, or caregiver. Agreed. And again, those two were HR 4016 and HR 4190. And again, I'll put it in the description. So moving on here, we got two more left. I appreciate you hanging on. Look, you can walk around blind or you can know what's going on and support the things that you believe in. And again, this stuff, if you believe in it, either for yourself or for another veteran, right? Some of this stuff, like, it's not going to apply to me, or you think it's not going to apply to you today. Maybe it's going to apply to you tomorrow, right? But the bottom line is that we had to take care of each other, and this is how we do it, right? The benefits that we have today, believe me, that was a rough, rocky road that was paved for us by the veterans that came before us, right? So let's move on. HR 4306, the Michael Lecik Military Firefighters Protection Act. 4306, HR 4306. The VFW supports this proposal to establish presumptions of service connection for diseases associated with firefighting. Many military firefighters report the use of AFFF, it's a firefighting foam, and that includes a lot of the PFAS, those forever chemicals. Our members who served as military firefighters reported continuous exposure to this foam during training and face a significant occupational risk due to health hazards associated with these chemicals. We have suggested to expand and improve the language of this legislation so all veterans exposed to these chemicals are provided the care and benefits they have earned. We believe the 5-year experience requirement as a firefighter is too long. For those individuals, one exposure alone could cause harm. Agreed. Additionally, there should not be a time limit for when a veteran can file a claim, as many of these conditions manifest years after exposure. This legislation is incredibly important to prevent the AFFF/PFAS from becoming another situation like Blue Water Navy or Camp Lejeune, in which veterans became sick and died, waiting decades for their conditions to be properly recognized and appropriately treated. Agreed. All right, last one here is HR 5559, Protecting Veterans Claim Options Act. Protecting Veterans Claim Options Act. The VFW supports the intent of HR 5559 and thanks Chairman Bost for what he is trying to achieve with this legislation. Far too many cases submitted in this category are left lingering with no decision. Classification on Appeals Modernization Act reports. We believe the change of evidence threshold as written is too vague, and we are concerned about the unintended consequence of further adding to the appeals backlog. As VA works to streamline the appeals process and to ensure staff is knowledgeable and trained in the complex areas involved with some appeals, every effort must be made to provide veterans suffering from service-connected disabilities with the compensation they deserve. The retroactive component of this legislation is applauded, along with other aspects that protect veterans as they navigate this daunting process. The VFW is committed to working with Chairman Bost's committee staff to clarify the intent of this bill. So they're working on, adding some clarifying, sections within the bill. All right, so with that, sorry, I kind of got a little allergy thing going on. Try not to sneeze for you. So with that, that concludes it. Happy to share those updates on some pending legislation. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.